Hello and welcome back to another video. So, have you ever heard about the island called Hashijima? What about if I say Gunkanjima, the name that the island is more commonly known by? It's a small island just off the coast of Nagasaki. The whole circumference of the island is just 1.2 kilometers, but in the 1960s it had a population density greater than Tokyo. The island was home to a coal mine, and all of the workers, and of course their families, lived on the island in high-rise buildings. The mine closed in 1974 though, and since then the island has been uninhabited. The name Gunkanjima means battleship island, and the name comes from the fact that the silhouette of the island looks like a battleship. Anyway, did you know that Hiroshima Prefecture has its own battleship island? It's in Chigirijima town, not too far off the coast of Takehara. Today I'm going to go and pay a visit, and I hope you'll join me. So this is Takehara port, and first of all we need to catch this ferry to Chigirijima town. The port I'm heading to is called Hiroshima Port, which is about a 30-minute ferry journey from Takehara. And it's a fairly nice morning, so I'm going to stand at the front of the ferry and watch the view. I'll probably put the whole ferry journey up as a separate video, but for now I'll speed up the bits I do show you, and I'll cut out the bits which are really not that interesting. We want to get to the island, not spend the whole video getting to the island. It's quite a warm morning this morning, and out over the inland sea you can see quite a bit of haze. I really love the scenery of the inland sea, and this is one of my favourite landscapes, or should I say seascapes. This is the view from the left-hand side of the ship, looking out towards Tadanomi. The low island to the very left of the picture is Okunoshima, commonly known as Rabbit Island. And over on the right side of the ship, this is the first glimpse of the island we're heading for today, Gunkanjima. By the way, the island we're talking about is called Chigirijima. You can see that even from here it's sort of starting to look like a battleship, but the angle is not the best, and unfortunately there's an island in the way. Trust me, there'll be a much better view later. First though, we have to get to Chigirijima. At Hiroshima Port we'll change to a much smaller ferry that serves Ikunoshima and Chigirijima itself. Okay, so we're just entering the channel which separates Chigirijima, which you can see on the left, and Ikunoshima, which is just coming into view on the right. I'm hoping I can pay a visit to Ikunoshima later today, but that'll be another video. Here we're just passing the ferry back to Takehara, and in the background you can see Tarumi Port, another port on Chigirijima. Okay, after almost exactly 30 minutes, here we are just arriving at Hiroshima Port. By the way, the ferry journey from Takehara to Hiroshima Port is 360 yen single or 690 yen return, which for a 30-minute ferry journey I don't think is bad at all. Okay, so that was a very pleasant ferry journey. I used to live on an island in the inland sea, Etajima, but having moved to the mainland, one of the things I miss is not being able to take the ferry on a regular basis. There's about a 25-minute wait at Shiromizu port before the next ferry arrives, but unless I'm very much mistaken, that's it just coming into view now. It's called Sazanami, and it's operated by Osaki Kamijima town. As I said earlier, it serves Ikunoshima and Chigirijima itself. The last time I caught this ferry, I was the only person on it, so let's see if it's any busier today or not. There are 2 people standing just behind me on the pier, so I'm guessing they might be planning to catch it too. This is another cheap ferry. From Shiromizu to Chigirijima and back is just 590 yen. Okay, so we've just left Shiromizu port, heading towards Chigirijima. The island right in front of us is Funajima. It's uninhabited now, but in the 1950s the island had a pearl cultivation industry, and there were as many as 30 people living on the island. By the way, this is the ferry Sazanami. You can sit inside, but it's a perfectly pleasant afternoon, so I've chosen a seat on the outside deck. The 2 people who were waiting at the ferry port did get on this ferry, but it's hardly crowded. Having left Shiromizu, the ferry calls first at Ikunoshima. If I do get off the ferry in Ikunoshima later today, I'll talk about the island more then, but let's just say that I think it's in danger of going the way of Funajima and becoming an uninhabited island. Still, it looks like an idyllic spot. I'm looking forward to hopefully being able to take a walk around the island later on today. By the way, it doesn't look like there's anyone waiting to catch the ferry. But then again, unless they worked on Chigirijima, there's no real reason for them to do so. The ferry calls here on its way back from Chigirijima, so if they wanted to go to Osaki Kamijima, they could just catch it then. Okay, having called in at Ikunoshima port, by the way, there weren't any people waiting, our next stop is Chigirijima itself. From Ikunoshima to Chigirijima is about 20 minutes by this ferry, and as we get closer, hopefully, we'll be able to see a much better view of the warship shape. While we're on the way to Chigirijima, let me tell you just a little bit about the island. The first thing to note is that it's actually a private island. The island is owned by Toho Zinc, and basically the whole of the island is a smelting factory. In fact, more than 40% of Japan's lead is smelted on Chigirijima. Because it is a private island, it's not actually possible to go onto the island itself. The exception is the pier where Sazanami, this ferry, docks. But even then, you can't go onto the island itself, not unless you work for the company. Even so, there are apparently quite a few factory enthusiasts who try to get onto the island without permission. Okay, as we round the headland on Ikunoshima, we get the first close-up view of Chigirijima. From this angle though, it still doesn't look particularly like a warship. As we get further out into the open sea though, it does start to resemble a battleship a little more. We're actually getting quite close to the island now. The hills you can see in the background are the mainland, so you can see part of Takehara. We're only a couple of minutes from the pier right now. The ferry will dock on the side of the island to the right as we are looking at it from here. It means that we'll get a good view of the buildings all the way down one side of the island. Like this, in fact. I'll be quiet for a bit now and we can admire, if that's the right word, the factory buildings together. I'm pretty sure that the small ferry we can see arriving now is the company ferry. Obviously, people who are unconnected with the company can't really use this ferry. Okay, so this is us just leaving Chigirijima. I think the ferry stayed for less than 30 seconds. I think that if any of the three of us on the ferry had said that we wanted to step onto the pier, we would have been able to. The ferry would have waited for us, but none of us did, and so there was no waiting. Anyway, let's take another look at the island and its buildings as we head back towards Ikunoshima. The design of the ferry which links Osaki Kamijima to Chigirijima is such that it has an end. In other words, it's not a roll-on, roll-off ferry like the ferry from Takehara is. The passenger part of the ferry is actually at the back of the ferry, which means that you get the better views of the island as you're leaving it rather than as you're heading towards it. I think the best view of the island, the best view in terms of it looking like a battleship, that is when you're about 10 minutes away. In other words, half of the way back to Ikunoshima. At that distance and that angle, I think it looks more like a warship than at any other point. At this point, I'm not quite sure why, but more than anything, it reminds me of Mont Saint-Michel in France. But with a little more distance, and as the ferry starts to turn a little bit to the west, you then start to see the silhouette taking on the form of a battleship. I'd say that this angle and this distance are pretty much perfect. It really does look like a battleship, and I can see why it's called the second Gunkanjima. In a way, I suppose it's unfortunate that Toho Zinc are not able to capitalize on the fame that the island has, or at least the fame that the island is starting to gain, perhaps by running tours of the island. I, for one, would certainly be most interested in taking part if the opportunity ever arose. Still, that may be something to look forward to for the future. Anyway, we're getting fairly close to Ikunoshima again now. I have the time, and the weather certainly looks like it's going to hold, so I'm going to get off and take a little walk around the island and see what I can find. To be completely honest, the only thing that's putting me off taking a walk around Ikunoshima is the fact that there might be wild boar or wild dogs. I know that it is a very rural island, so I certainly can't discount that possibility. Still, all that is for another video. For now, I hope you enjoyed this little trip to Chigirijima, the second battleship island in Japan, Hiroshima's very own battleship island. Thanks for joining me on the journey, and I hope to see you in another one very soon. Assuming there aren't wild boar and wild dogs on Ikunoshima that end up attacking. Anyway, bye for now, and wish me luck.